my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, February the 26th, and it is a sunshiny day, and the temperatures are much warmer than they were in the middle of this last week. So over the course of this last week, we've had the really cold weather. I remember looking at my phone at some point. This would have been in the evening and the temperature pops up and it's like it's currently minus 30 degrees Celsius, which is about minus 30 Fahrenheit. So it was evening and a lovely time to be inside and sheltered with heat on and a sweater and my crib blanket and stitching and an audio book and a beverage and a snack. Anyway, so we've had some really cold temperatures over this last week, which I don't necessarily love the cold temperatures, but it did prove to be beneficial in one way. And when we get to the end of this video, once we get past the topic, I'm going to tell you the two funny stories about that topic once we get there. So if you don't care about the random sorry, my hands are really dry and I've just went, while we're doing this, I just need a little bit of moisture on my hands. So if you don't care about the weird, non-stitchy, personal related stories that have no bearing on anything, then you don't have to bother listening to the story because it'll be after everything. And if you do care about the random, if you do care about the random stories, there's going to be one at the end of the video. So yeah, it's been a cold week. I think it's the last like bitterly cold week that we will have, you know, from now till spring starts, you know, and then of course it won't be there. So I think we've made it through there. Anyway, I know that there are lots of places that have been experienced over the course of this past week have been experiencing really cold temperatures, a lot of snow, ice, all the winter things that are going on, and certainly there are still in the forecast for certain parts of North America, because that's generally where that comes up on the news for me. There are some more potentially big snowstorms coming and some cold temperatures, so the North American continent is not necessarily out of it just yet. I'm just grateful that where I live, we're out of it. And it's always funny because I was, again, because it comes up on your phone with the weather app, you know, looking at the numbers, it's always funnier on the day where like you're through the cold snap that, you know, it's cold, it's that over the course of like an evening, it's starting to warm up. Like it was colder at noon than it is at 6 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night, which I think it's, you know, not necessarily the way that you expect temperatures to go, but I was like going, oh, thank heavens we're getting warmer. It's going to be okay again. Anyway, so as always, if you are a new viewer, thank you for stopping by and spending some time with me. And if you are a returning viewer, I truly appreciate all of you who come back and check in with my stitching journey. As always, I appreciate all the comments. So just wanted to have a little chat about the comments. Okay, so for those of you who had comments about some suggestions for what to do with the family pictures, thank you for those suggestions. Checking into a few. There was one suggestion about, you know, sending out a family email that had been done before they came to me. This sounds really horrible. I am the last stop, which is why they were coming to me. And it is happening, you know, again, because we've gone through a number of estates in the family. I am the last stitcher, and generally, for the most part, nobody has a lot of interest in the stitched pieces, which I feel a little bit sad about. But, you know, it is what it is. You know, I know that one of the pieces that, when my most recent aunt who passed away, that her mother had stitched, my maternal grandmother, it was really interesting because my dad was the one who was like, I want that. And so totally fine with it, because it's, like I say, it's not necessarily something that you would expect my dad to be wading into, but it was one that he had a big affinity for. So it's in my parents' house, which is great. After they pass, that's a whole other kettle of fish. We'll see what happens in that one, but I don't think that's coming anytime soon. Jay made a comment about, he's really the last stitcher, as in really the only stitcher, the only crafty person in his entire family. And, that's can be a tough place to be, because, the people around you don't necessarily appreciate what you're doing or the time and effort that it takes to do it. Certainly in my family, because in the generations above me, there were multi-craftual people, and there were stitchers that certainly the people in my family have been trained to trained about things related to crafts, and the fact that you need to appreciate the time and work, whether you are willing to do it yourself. I always laugh because my dad is the one where anytime my mom goes, "Do you have any idea the number of colors that are in this?" He knows it's a big number. So he's like, 182. So he's been trained on things like, if you're ever asked, "Do you have any idea the number of colors that it's he may thinks it's 13, and that's going to be the really wrong answer. So not to do that. So take his answer and multiply it by a lot. And then anyway, it's funny watching him being trained to appreciating crafts, needlework, knitting, quilting. He's a trained husband about appreciating crafts. So it is tough to be the only one, but that is the benefit of community. And I love the fact that sort of over the pandemic, the number of people within this community we've gotten online. We have Zoom meetings. We've, the Flosstube community has grown, that we have this community, so that if you are the only one in your family, or you are the only one in your physical community, that if nothing else, there is an online community for you who will be there for you to support you, provide help, inspiration, advice, and appreciation. And I think for the most part, the stitching community is great and does all of those things. It's also great to have a getting community together now that we're sort of past a lot of the pandemic issues and meeting in person, which was really one of the drivers behind me starting the stitching at the library. We don't have generally any physical stores here where I live that are hosting stitch-ins and stuff like that. So that was why I wanted to start stitching at the library. And Jay made a comment that he was really sad and really wished that he could come to a stitching at the library. And my answer to Jay is, hey man, if you are ever coming to Canada, you just tell me when you're coming, because we will make sure that we have a stitching at the library. One way or another, we'll make it happen. If you ever come to Canada, we'll do one special just for you. Sorry, I'm in my thing. I need to cross things off so I know what I've done. Yeah, so Alila had the one where she's like, send a family email about those pictures, and the answer is yeah. We did that. I'm the last stop. Okay. Lynette had a really great comment. She was talking about, if I really like symmetrical things, do I know about ink circles? And my answer is, yeah. Yeah, I know about ink circles, and I have a large collection of her charts. I do have one on the go. You can see it in my whip parade. I've got Bee's Knees on the go, and I have decided, I have a lot of ink circles charts that have not been worked on. Not started, not worked on. My answer is I'm going to work on them one at a time. So while Bee's Knees is still in process, I'm not allowed. was gonna say, I was just had my multi-year plan going on in my head. It's like, no, that's true. Yeah, one at a time is really where I'm going with that. There's another ink circles in the 5-year plan, which clearly says to me I'm expecting that by the time that one comes up in the 5-year plan, that Bee's Knees will be completed. And she was commenting that when she does her pieces that are very symmetrical, and it's interesting when you watch Flosstube and watching people where they've started something and they've only gotten a little bit into it, the number of times that you can see a Flosstuber go like, I'm not sure which way is up. Which, when we get to my stitching for this week, I'm going to show you what I do on mine where I think there's a risk of that. You know, what I do predominantly for those. Lynette puts a thread at the top, and when I show you what I do on this other one, I'll explain to you why I don't do the thread at the top. And there's a couple of reasons for me, just because of how I stitch. And Lynette also had a question about whether or not specialty stitches can be done on Aida. And I would say there's a couple of things to factor into that decision. One is how comfortable you are piercing the center of those Aida squares and working with that. So I would certainly do some practice stitching on some Aida to see whether you were okay with that. You know, so for example, doing an eyelet on an Aida, you know, given that you're having to pierce into the center of a square on Aida and pull that apart, whether or not that works for you, whether you like doing it, whether you are okay piercing the fabric, pulling it together. There are some that may be easier than others just because they tend to go how they work. Like, you know, there may be some Rhodes versions that are a little bit easier to work with than others, but I wouldn't say that it's easy. You're certainly, if you're trying to do specialty stitches on Aida, you're certainly setting yourself up for some extra challenges. And I'll talk about the specialty stitches in a little bit more when we get to, you know, the one piece that I've got going where we do that, and I'll talk about that. Kelly also had a question. Her eyesight is not great, and so she was looking at I don't know which video it was, about a shadow, you know, could she do a chatelaine and could she do it on 20 count Aida? And I don't recommend that. So if you're gonna try a chatelaine on Aida, there are several things I want you to consider before you even start. So number one, if you're gonna try to do a chatelaine on Aida, I would say do it on either 14 or 16 count Aida. Most of the chatelaine designs are a lot of the ones that I have, the recommended fabric is a 32 count linen, which would convert to a 16 count Aida. You'll see in the Facebook groups a lot of discussion about people going down to 28 count because they're wanting to do it on a hand-dyed fiber, which gives you a little bit more gives you some shrinkage. So I would say either 14 or 16 count Aida are better options, because then your beads will fit better, it's more proportionate. So I would say if you're heading towards an Aida for a chatelaine, 16 or 14 count as opposed to 20 count. Second of all, I would go into the Facebook group to ask, certainly the ones that I have, I know that there's a lot of specialty stitches, so I can't say that there are any chatelaines in my collection that I would necessarily recommend to be done on Aida because they do have a lot of specialty stitches. I would go into the Facebook group and pose the question as to whether or not there are some of the chatelaines which have the least amount of specialty stitches. because that's probably a better option if you're working on Aida. Again, I would get a scrap piece of Aida and try some specialty stitches on the Aida to see whether you even like it or not. So things like doing an eyelet, doing a Smyrna, doing a Rhodes something, whether it's a Rhodes square or a Rhodes rectangle. I would do a number of those stitches on a scrap piece of Aida to see whether it's even remotely within the realm of something that you would enjoy. It's, like I say, it's an incremental challenge doing it on Aida. So I would say before you even buy a chart, try some practice specialty stitches on Aida to see whether it's even within the realm of possibility. Again, this is a hobby. You want it to be enjoyable. The worst thing you want to do is spend the money on the chart, getting the stuff to do it, and then just hating every minute of it. So don't get me wrong, I'm the one who goes like, there are certain parts to things where I go, I don't necessarily enjoy this part, but I'm going to love it at the end. But for chatelaine, with the level of specialty stitches that I've seen, certainly in all of the charts that I have, I think that would be really hard to do on an Aida. But again, I haven't checked in the Facebook group to see if anybody's posted anything on things that they've done on Aida. That's my recommendation. The other thing that goes into that is if you are going to try to do specialty stitches on Aida, make sure you're not using a tapestry needle. So a tapestry needle, which most of us use for cross stitching, has a blunt tip. So that it's not, you have less risk of it piercing the fabric that you're working on. If you're trying to do specialty stitches on Aida, you're going to need one that has a sharp tip because you are specifically going to be wanting to pierce your fabric. If you're trying to do it with a tapestry needle with the blunt end, it's going to make an already problematic thing even worse. So if you're going to get the Aida scrap cloth and you're going to try it on there, make sure you get a needle that has a sharp tip on it because it will help with trying to pierce those center blocks. And then great comment from, I think it's Poster Gentle, about the topic from last week about signing your work. They said that they stitch their name, city, and the year that the project was completed into the edge of the fabric where it can be seen on the back once it is framed. Now, the funny thing is I had this whole conversation with myself as I was reading the conversation. So before I'd read the entire sentence, I'd already had things going like in my head. She said, it was like, put her sitting. I'm like, wow, like I'd like to see an example of this. Like, wow, you're putting the name on the front. No, keep reading. Oh, on the back into the edge. Okay. It's a really interesting comment. I really, really like it. I'm thinking about that in the context of some stuff that I've already completed, whether or not, like, I really like that suggestion. You're stitching it into the edge of the fabric. I'm going to check with a framer, just sort of saying like, again, depending on how various framers are putting a framed picture together and what they do with their edges, may lead you to different options as to what would be better than others. So whether it's being pinned or laced or heaven forbid glued, I know that there are some framers that do it, and there are some new acid-free things. I'm 172 years old, and I've been raised in the era of like glue, stitching, ooh, bad, awful, damaging, which is not necessarily the case anymore. Like the sticky board has acid-free and 27 things, and so some of that reaction is no longer relevant or realistic to some of the things that are currently available. but I love that suggestion, stitching it in so that you have the information in the edge of the piece. So thank you for that. I thought that was a really great suggestion. All right. With that, let's get into some stitching. I've had a very good week. I'm very pleased with my stitching this week. Just wait. All right. As always, let's start off with my Sunday piece. I'm keeping up with my stitching something with an alphabet on Sundays, and my current one that I'm working on is by Little House Needleworks, Spring ABCs. I am stitching this on a 28 count Star Sapphire Jobelan with my own colorway. The colors of the fibers that I'm using for this will be listed in the show notes down below in case you're wanting to know what they are. So I've had a really good week. Look at that house. And even as I'm doing this, it's like I knew I was supposed to do this before I came, but I didn't. So let me haul out my book so I can find out where I'm supposed to be. So as of today, to be on track with doing one letter a week, I should be all the way to I. So I'm absolutely on track, and I am ahead of schedule by this much, which is great. Now, it's a good thing that I'm ahead because there is a risk over the next 7 weeks that I won't get as much stitching time on this as I have historically. So it's good that I'm ahead. My goal is to stay on track. But so far, I am very, very pleased with how this is coming along. So there's my spring ABCs. Embarrassingly, I still have not found my bag with the extra clips. It's driving me nuts. I so distinctly remember putting them into a drawer. It's not any of the logical ones. What weird drawer could I possibly have put it into? All right, that's spring ABCs. So then on Monday, I was going to work on my canvas work piece, which is my new start this month, celebrating traditional stitches. This is an exclusive chart that you can only get from Traditional Stitches, located here in Bears Paw, Alberta. So it's just outside of the Calgary city limits, by the lovely Frida's Fancy Stitching. So my goal at the start of this stitching session is that I wanted to finish that first, sorry, I'm juggling. There it is. I wanted to finish that first block, and I did more than that. So here's where I got to. So I finished all of this first block and did block number 2 and block number 3. Just a little bit, if anybody has this in their stash or is contemplating working on it, I have a little bit of a hint. Not that I'm going to rip out anything that I did. I'm okay with it, but in hindsight, there's one thing that I would have changed when I was stitching this. Frida is fantastic in this chart where she tells you, so for example, this stitch is called the mistake stitch. And in the directions, in this pattern, it says you are going to need to cut your lengths to be 36 inches to do each of these mistake stitches, which is great. Love it, love it. Because I hate running out of thread in the middle of a specialty stitch. That's something like this. Jessica's are the ones where I hate that, because then you have to go off, cut another one, and I've lost my place. And anyway, so I love it. I love it. She's done a great job. So this is done with watercolors, which is a 3-stranded fiber. So you can cut it into the 36 inches and you can do 3 of these. There's a total of 9. So I did the first 3, which was great, cut off my next length and did my next 3, which I was like going, great, it's all looking great. And then I cut off my next length and then it had a lighter. So it came out just a little bit different. It's more green than the other ones. These aren't identical, but they're quite similar. So in hindsight, what I would do is I would cut off all 3 lengths of 36 inches. And then I would alternate, right? So from length 1, length 2, length 3, length 1, length 2, length 3, length 1, length 2, length 3. Because then it would just give you that, well, for me, it would be a more symmetrical variegation of what you were doing. Again, this isn't driving me nuts, but I can tell it's like I did 3 and 3 and 3. It's okay. It's not worth ripping out. I'm totally fine with it. But if you have this in your stash and you haven't started stitching it, that's my recommendation, is that I would cut all 3 lengths, because then you can alternate. Like I say, even when I did like length number 2, I was like going, you know, it's close. It's very, very similar. It's fine. No big deal. No need to change anything. And then I got to my 3rd length and went, a little more green. Still fine. I'm okay with it. Not ripping it out. Just a hint for you to consider if you've got this in your stash and you're contemplating doing it. So there is my canvas work piece. So 3 of the squares out of 14 accomplished. So I felt that was a pretty good start on that one. Don't you love when you know you're doing Flosstube and you still don't set yourself up for the right spot to put everything? All right. Solved, sort of. All right. Okay, next up. So then that brings me to Tuesday. So Monday, I was happy with my canvas work and went, you're good to go, move along. So then I came back to my Celtic Snow by Northern Expressions Needlework. I am doing this on a 28 count Midnight Tryst Jobelan by Fabrics by Stephanie, using all of the called for Dinky Dyes. And I'm happy with my progress. I got all of those specialty stitches done in the center snowflake. And here's that weird one way up at the top. That's the one that's going to let me start working on the border. To be perfectly honest, when I put that last one in, I was like, just start working on the border. And I was just like, you are too tired. Knock it off. You're not going to get done. You're not going to do it. So just quit pretending. I will say it's interesting to see how many things I can find to distract myself to take away from working on the specialty stitches. Some of them are not bad. Like I say, so these bigger ones, like I'm okay with that. Those were fine. These ones that I used to fill in here, I could do as a series of 3 altogether. That was great. The ones that drove me absolutely incomprehensibly nuts are these outer edge ones. They're hanging out there. There's no easy way to finish them off. Like, I mean, look at that poor thing up there. Anyway, which is why there's only one, because then I can do the border and then it'll give me something else to tie into. But like, they're just hanging out there in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, I got them done. So all of the specialty stitches are now done in the center. And I'm just going to revert back into that conversation about doing specialty stitches on non-linen, non-even weave. There are a lot of them. Like, I'm just trying to see how close I can get on. Right. So these ones, like, you're using every single hole. Like, so for me, like, these would be a nightmare to do on Ada just because of how many, you know, this one, just because of, like, it's layer upon layer of specialty stitches. Like, these, for me, I would go, there's no way. So this is an example of one, you know, where there's a lot of specialty stitches, and I would unequivocally say I highly, highly do not recommend that this is done unaided, because I think you'll drive yourself insane trying to make this work. So yeah. So yeah, anyway. So I got all my specialty stitches. It took me way, way longer than it should have, because I'd look and go like, but I don't want to stitch that one. So I would do something else, and maybe do something else again, go like, okay, just fine, do the two. So it took me way longer to get those done than it should have. It took all of the stitching time to get that done. So this is also the piece that I was going to talk about. Who is it that said that oh yeah, Lynette, who said she put a thread at the top. So I don't put a thread at the top because I tend to use scroll rods for larger pieces like this, which means the top of my fabric is generally buried in the scroll rod. Because certainly for pieces like this, I'm a center starter and work my way out. So I wouldn't be able to see it. So what I do, so I'm just trying to unclip my edge here, is I just do an arrow on the side, and I tend to do it in the middle of the piece. And so the reason for that is, even as I scroll up, you know, you can probably see just the tip of it, which is going to look different than the bottom of it. So you can see where it is. And I've got one of these arrows on each side of this, right? Just so that there's no mistaking what's going on, right, as to which direction is up. And to be perfectly honest, even so my goal for this is, once it's finally finishes, that I would get this framed, I would leave these arrows on even when I take it to the framer, so that they also know which way is up, because you just never know, right? It looks this way and this way technically would look mostly the same, but this way and this way also look the same, but it would drive me nuts if I got home and discovered that, because then it's really sideways. So even when I took it to the framer, I would leave these on. And generally for example, when I did the Egyptian mandala, there is something that when I added my initials and the date that I completed into Egyptian mandala, and it's quite well hidden. I've had a couple of relatives where they were like, it's kind of like, where's Waldo? They did find it, but it did take them quite a bit of time to find it. But I stitched in, I know where it is, and it's also the thing that I could see it when I got in there and went, okay, so I know, because I stitched it somewhere where I'm going like, that's the bottom. So anytime I look at it closely, I can sort of go, I could tell if it was hung correctly or not. To your average person, they don't care, but I would know. But there's where I'm at with my Celtic Snow. I think I've made great progress on this so far this year. Don't kid yourself. There's like, we're not anywhere close to being finished, because of course I have that big gigantic border plus thousands of beads left to go on this. So great progress, not close to a finish, which that's how life goes. All right, which brings me to Wednesday. So Wednesday was the beginning of Lent, and I dutifully started my Lent project. I'm not going to show that to you just yet. It's because I'm going to show it to you when we get to the topic. But I did start my Lent stitching. That's just a hint. And then on Saturday, which of course was the 25th, and that is my designated day to work on my Little Bits of Christmas by the Drawn Thread. I am stitching this on, I think it's a 32, but check the notes. It could be a 28. Oops. Picture this plus Serene Lugana. So far, I'm using the called for colors except for the red, which I am using Gloriana Poinsettia. Now, it's a lot green. It's a very pale green. So it's actually quite similar in color tonality to the fleece that I'm wearing. When I hold it up, it looks very white, but it does have a hint of green. And I am stitching this as 3 blocks across and 4 height-wise. So it's a variation, whoops, it's a variation on this. My goal, so there's 12 squares that I'm planning on stitching. My goal is that every 25th of every month, I'm going to get one of these blocks done. I started in December, which means I should technically have the stitching, if all goes according to plan, I should have the stitching part of this completed by November 25th, which means there's a slim chance I can turn it into a fully finished object for the month of December, because I already know when I'm putting it on. Anyway, check back later. So my goal for this Saturday was to make sure is to get, so I had the CHR left to do, plus a little bit of back stitching to finish into here, because it was one big line, and I just, anyway. And I had a couple of these red berries that you can see here, way over here, that I missed when I did that part. Anyway, if anybody has this in their stash and they're planning on stitching the Christmas, make sure you pick up those little berries as you're going through them, because coming back and doing them after the fact is annoying as all get out. Just saying. I speak from experience. Anyway, I love how this is looking. Love, love, love this. So I'm very happy about how this is coming along. I am on track, right? So I got my CHR in there. Everything's done. So those first 3 blocks are fully complete. I'm still having debate as to whether or not these white birds need to have a little bit of outlining, but we're going to hang on for that till the very end. See how it comes along. It's not bad. I can see them in real life. I feel a little bit like a little bit of back stitching might help them a bit, but we'll see. But I love how this is looking. Love, love, love this. I have my next block, I know what that's going to be, and I have the block after that, I know what that's going to be, and then the block after that, that's where we have to start getting into some additional decisions. Okay, so there's that one. And then, okay, and then the only stitching I have left to show you is my Lent stitching, which is going to be the topic. So we're going to deal with that when we get to the topic. So let's do a couple of the other portions of this program. Let's talk about stashquisitions. I don't have a lot. One I'm not really going to show you. I'm just going to tell you, I had an incident this week with my stitching lamp. It had an accident. It got broken. It had a problem. So I've had to order another lamp light that I use for my stitching. I'm not going to specifically show it. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's too early. I like to use a lamp for a bit so I know how it's working and what I like or I don't like or whether I need to adjust or whatever. But I did have to go off and get another light. The one, I technically could get one that isn't exactly, it's the same one that I had before. But it was going to be really, really expensive to get that one again. the way the prices are right now. Again, so it doesn't mean if I came across a smokingly good deal, would I get another one? Probably. But the prices that I could get at this point in time, because I need a light now, it was not a good price for me. So I bought something else. I'm not going to tell you like I said, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is because I need to use it for longer so I can decide how I'm feeling about it and whether or not it's the right option for me. So that was one of my stash acquisitions this week. The other stash acquisition that I received, you're going to laugh at. So Cheryl from Happy Handcraft Studio, I had seen before when she worked on her Jubilee pincushion ornament, and I'd seen it finished. And it's lovely, and you should check her out. And she graciously brought it to the library for me to see again, because I'm hoping at some point over the next 6 to 8 months that I'll actually finish mine into a pincushion. See, setting some realistic timelines there for myself. She had a pin on the back of hers, and I had this little moment where I was like going, I might like a pin for mine. And there's a whole story behind her pin, and I don't have that option in mind, but I was kind of going, I was thinking about a pin, and I went to Etsy and I found some pins and I ordered them and they came and I like them. Actually, I'm just saying, yeah, so they're in the plastic baggies. I've decided I should probably take them out of the bag just so we don't have glare on glare, so hang on a second. So I ordered these two. So here's one. Actually, oops, that's not right. That's where did that board go? All right, I'm going to hold them up. We'll see if you can see them clearly without a board behind them. So here's one. So this is the Elizabeth Platinum Jubilee. So it's got her cipher, the crown, the flowers around the edges are for the 4 flowers of the United Kingdom. It's got the 70 years. Purple is the color of the Platinum Jubilee. So that's the Platinum Jubilee one, which I'm planning on putting onto my Platinum Jubilee pincushion that I've stitched and finished, which is by Helen Phillips off of Etsy. I also have purchased her memorial piece for Queen Elizabeth, which is fairly similar to her Jubilee one, but I also have the memorial one, and that is in my to be stitched this year as well. And so for that one, I got, so it's exactly the same, but this is the in memoriam of Queen Elizabeth. So it's got the same outline. It's just all done in silver with the black center. So those are my 2 pins that I'm planning on attaching to my pin cushions for Queen Elizabeth. I was very pleased with them when they came. I will put a link to those below in case anybody's interested in them. So those are my stash acquisitions for this week. I will say I'm expecting to show some stash acquisitions next week, but they are going to be Etsy things. They're Etsy things I found, but they're sitting in the cart and I have not pulled the plug on them, but I'm expecting them to come. And the last thing on the stash acquisitions is, I was just going to say, so far I have done very well with my goal. This sounds like a weird goal, but my goal was to not put in a Nashville order, which sounds absolutely completely counterintuitive because I love Nashville market. I love seeing all the new releases. I love all the hype. I've gone through all of the stuff, and don't kid yourself, there's stuff in there that I really, really like the like the Jeanette Douglas ones, like, yes, they're awesome. And I've seen the stitched models live and in person, and they're fabulous. So why am I not buying them? One, because I have a lot of Jeanette Douglases already that I have not stitched. Two, I'm planning on using them as rewards for myself, so that when I reach a goal, so I have to set the goal for myself. So like for Jeanette Douglas, I've set myself a goal, and once I reach that goal, that's when I'm going to be allowed to buy one of the Jeanette Douglas Nashville releases. I'm not telling you what the goal is. It's all going to come as a big surprise. But the ones that I have from Nashville that I like, which there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's maybe about 6 that I really like from Nashville, but I have successfully not placed an order, so it's okay. The funny thing is, even though I don't have the charts, don't kid yourself, there's 2 of them that I've already started kitting up. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine. I don't own the charts, but I'm kitting them up. Excuse me. Oh. Anyway, so that's my stash acquisitions for this week. Let's talk about some announcements. Library stitching. I have the next library stitching at the library booked. I have it booked for Saturday, March the 18th from 9:30 to 12:30 at the Signal Hill Library. The address for that is in the notes section down below in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. For anybody who was there at the last stitching at the library, because I had already tried to book it that day and couldn't. So at the library you can only book up to a month ahead. And so originally, so last Saturday I was trying to book it for exactly 1 month later and couldn't. It was already booked up. So this Saturday was my day where I was going to try to go in and book it for the 25th. And while I was fiddling around with that, I ended up on the 18th again. And whoever had previously had it booked has changed their booking, and it was now available. So I have it for the 18th, 9:30 to 12:30. Look forward to seeing those of you who can make it. If anybody is in the greater Calgary area and is wanting to come stitch with people, you are more than welcome to come. We have lots of room at that particular location, so you don't necessarily need to tell me in advance that you're coming. You can just show up. When you're coming into the library, come through the main doors, head to your right, just past the photocopiers on the right is a room with a glass. You can see into the room, you'll see us stitching there. So if you can make it, come. You don't need to tell me in advance. If you can make it for just a part of the time, just to try us out, do that. We'd love to have you come and stitch with us. So the next one is Saturday, March 18th at the Signal Hill Library from 9:30 to 12:30. And then the other one that I wanted, because I have done a terrible job, but we're coming up on March. There is a embroidery exhibition that is going to start March the 1st, so it's going to run the whole month of March at the downtown Calgary Library of Silk Embroidery. It's called Auspicious Blessings. So I am planning on trying to get down there to go see the exhibit myself, but in case, again, if you're in the greater Calgary area, this is going to be, it's free at the downtown Calgary Library, which is a really interesting library. If you haven't been there before, this is a great opportunity to go down and see that library. When the library was being constructed, you had the opportunity to, you were, by doing this, you were sort of contributing funds into the building fund, but you could have a name engraved into one of the window panes. And my mother's youngest sister, who has now passed away, was a librarian for her career, and so while she was still alive, I had brought this to the attention of my parents and said, because people struggle with ideas, and it's like, why don't we put her name on a window at the downtown library? And so that's what happened. So her name is residing on one of the window libraries down at the downtown Calgary location. And I had gone down, and you can go to the information desk and they can tell you where the name is, so you know where you're looking, as opposed to trying to find it on all of the windows in that library. So I did go down and I found it and took a picture of it. So when I go down to see this embroidery exhibition, I will be making sure that I swing by Auntie Lynn's window and have a look at her name at the library as well. And and the last two things, just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of floss tubers. Hopefully, most of you know about Cheryl, the Happy Handcraft Studio. She's getting awfully close to 1,000 subscribers, and I would love for her to get above that mark. It would be awesome. She has a fantastic floss tube channel. She's multi-craftual, crocheting, knitting, quilting, and cross stitching, and she does fantastically book reviews, which I love. So I'm usually avidly listening to the book reviews and then going to the Calgary Public Library and adding some of them onto my holds list. So it's a great floss tube channel. And then the next one that I want to draw your attention to is a new floss tube channel. It just started. There's only one video and it is fabulous. So you should go see Lisa. Her channel is Lost in Stitches. She's done her first floss tube, which is fantastic, and she does a whip parade. This is Lisa from Edmonton, who came down to our stitching at the library. She's now started a floss tube channel, and it's awesome. She's got great stitching. She's going to lots of retreats. So if you are heading to Stitch North, she's going to that. She's going to the retreat in Edmonton. She's got a number of retreats on her schedule. So if you're going to any of those, you're going to want to check out her stitching and get acquainted with her, because then when you go to the retreat, you're going to know her. So it was a really great first episode. I've watched it. I have to go back and comment because I wasn't in as we all know, when you watch it on television, you can't do the comments, but I will be going back and adding a comment to hers because she's a really lovely person. She's got fantastic projects. She's done a lot of stitching. She's got a really interesting story and it's just great stitching. So go check her out. That's Lisa at Lost in Stitches. Which brings me to the topic. We're already in an hour. We haven't even hit the topic, and it's going to be, we'll see how long this goes. So for those of you who like short videos, you can just put it on pause and come back to it. For those of you who like longer videos, this can be a longer one. Let's talk about Lent stitching. So as always, I want to give full credit to Vonna Pfeifferson, the Twisted Stitcher, because it is entirely because of her that I started doing a Lent stitch. This is going to be my 4th Lent that I'm doing a Lent stitch. Anyway, I've just realized I was going to haul out that first one. Anyway, never mind that. We'll talk about that next week about what I did for the first 3. But this is my 4th Lent that I have picked a Lent project. This is a new project. I'm really thrilled with how it's coming along so far. I think there's a chance it's actually going to work out. So enough ado about that. Really, and so why do I do a Lent stitch? It's really just a focus thing for me. Vonna was like, where your focus is for Lent. It is a celebration of the Easter season. Which is what I make my Lent stitching about. It comes into the projects that I've chosen for my Lent stitching. And so yeah, I started it 4 years ago. I thought it was great, loved how it worked out, and have done it ever since. So what have I chosen for my Lent stitch this year? I have chosen to do the Stoney Creek Spring Bell Pull. This is what it looks like. Now, I am stitching this from the magazine. So in case you are a Stoney Creek subscriber or have old issues, in case you're wanting to know, this is in the February 2006 magazine. This issue is now out of print. You can't get it as a back issue. If you're still wanting to stitch this, Stoney Creek has released this as a leaflet, and I believe that it is leaflet number 155. If it's not that, check in the note section below because I will make sure I've got the correct information down there, but I did look it up. I think it's 155. So you can just get this as a leaflet from them. So I've chosen this for my Lent stitch. 1, because it's thematic. 2, my goal is there are 7 weeks in Lent. That's not true. It's about 6.5. So technically, from a calendar perspective, this is more than you ever wanted to know. There are 47 days in Lent according to me, the way that I count it. If you're from a Christian faith background, you may be sitting there going like, wait a minute, there's 40 days in Lent, but the 40 days in Lent don't count the Saturdays. There's a whole thing about how you come up with the 40 days. From a calendar perspective, starting from Ash Wednesday, which was the 22nd, going to and including Easter Sunday is 47 days, because I'm about the math. So 47 days, which means it's 6 2/3 of a week. Anyway, so my plan on this is because there are 6 letters in the word spring. My goal is over the course of Lent, if I can get one of these blocks done every week during the season of Lent, I can get this whole thing finished by Easter Sunday. I put this into Markup RXP last summer, and oh my goodness, thank heavens I did that. There are a lot of learnings about that, which we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, but thank heavens I did it over the course of the summer. It was ready to go. By putting it into Markup RXP, it also gave me the ability to go exactly how many stitches are in this. So I took the total number of stitches in this project, divided it by 47, and according to the math, I need to do 182 stitches every day in order to meet that goal. Now, it's not exactly correct because it does not include the back stitching. This is a Stoney Creek. There is some back stitching. I don't think it's egregious back stitching, but there is some back stitching, and Markup RXP does not count the back stitches. So in my head, I need to do more than 182 to keep this on track. But I've done all of that math. I'm doing it in Markup RXP. Would you like to see where I got to? So this is on a grime guard. I'm not taking it off because I need to work on it today. So you're just going to have to suffer through how it looks on the grime guard. Here's my ass so far. Okay, in case you can't tell, I'm thrilled with how this is coming along. I was very, very concerned. It's a Stoney Creek. You know, Stoney Creeks can get into that, you know, persnickety, 3 stitches here, 4 stitches there, blah, blah, blah. And there is some of that. But it's been okay so far, which is great. Like I say, when last week's video, I said that by the time I got to this week's video, I would know whether there was a shot at whether or not this whole Lent plan was going to work out for me. And based on where I'm at today, February 26th, I think I've got a shot, because so far I'm ahead of schedule. So technically I started this on Wednesday. I need to have this block completed by end of day Tuesday. As of right now, there are only 77 cross stitches left to go, plus the back stitching, which I'm hoping to get accomplished today, which means I'm going to be 2 days ahead of schedule. And I'm only whispering that because I don't want to jinx myself. So I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. Now, I'm also ridiculous in that I've also looked at the 6 blocks and ranked. I know the ranking of the blocks as to which are the heaviest stitches and which are the lightest stitches. So ranked from 1 to 6, from most to least. This is block number 3. So I've got 2 blocks that are even more stitching than this, and I've got 3 blocks that are less stitching than in this block, which is great, which is why I'm going, I think I've got a shot of this plan coming to fruition. I am thrilled with how this is looking. I am stitching this on the called for 28 count Plum Shenandoah fabric. That fabric has been discontinued, just like the Christmas Shenandoah that I used for Musical Christmas. And don't kid yourself, if I wasn't sitting here thinking this week as I was working on this going like, what is with you in the Shenandoah, the fabric over this past 6 months? So you did Musical Christmas, and now you're working on Christmas Shenandoah, and now you're working on Plum Shenandoah. Well, that's just how the stitching's working out. But I was having a chuckle going, Shenandoah fabric linen has been discontinued. And anyway, I will say I did buy this fabric when this chart came out. This is one of those items where I said, this is a specialty fabric. I could not get it locally. I ordered it from Stoney Creek. I will say I was very glad I ordered it when I did, because I know that there was something even posted back then. So this was 2006, that they ran out of the Shenandoah fabric really, really quickly. If you buy the leaflet, the picture on the leaflet shows it stitched on just plain fabric, and there are instructions in it as to, you know, how much space to leave between them when you don't have the blocks. But yeah, this is, again, one of those cases where I'm grateful that I was smart enough at the time to say, I like the specialty fabric, and I bought the specialty fabric. And I was grateful I bought it when I did, because I do know that they ran out quite quickly and were like, we can't get any more of it. So I remember that whole episode and going like, oh, thank heavens I have this. I will tell you at the same time, I even bought, so I have this specific bell pull hanger as well. I bought it at the same time. I loved how this looked, period, full stop. So I bought all the things from the US. I did look it up. So it was $10 US for the fabric. It's a really good $10. Anyway, so there's where I'm at. I am using most of the called for colors. So it is all DMC except for this S, which is done with Weeks Dye Works Mulberry. Now it's hard to see on camera. It isn't heavily variegated. There is some slight variegation. But again, I had bought the 2 skeins of Weeks Dye Works Mulberry a long time ago for this project, so I'm using the Weeks Dye Works. If you just found a solid dark purple to put in there, it would work just as well. So don't feel that you need to get the Weeks Dye Works, but I had bought it, I'm using it. It was in stash, I'm using the stash. The changes that I have made to this are in the yellow. Yes, this has yellow. It's daffodils. Don't kid yourself. I went in looking for daffodils and daffodil options. And there is a daffodil option, which is white with pink, but I just went, it was going to be too much work for me to convert it, so I'm keeping it as yellow daffodils. It's not driving me berserk. I'm okay with it, but I did lighten up my daffodils. I had pulled the original colors and looked at them and went, that's too yellow for me. I need my daffodils to be more anemic. Less jaundiced? Okay, just paler? Anyway, so I have adjusted my color scheme for the daffodils. I took out the two darkest yellows and lightened it up. So the very lightest yellows that are used in this are exactly the same, but I have replaced 3 of the colors. One of them was replaced with an anchor color, and the other 2, I just sort of moved within the range. I will specifically in the show notes below put the list of what I'm using for the yellows. There are a total of 6 colors to make up the yellow. I will list those 6 colors in the notes below in case you're looking for them. But I did keep out the darkest of the yellows that are called for this, because you're going to see why I had a little bit of a, I'm not good with this, right? Woo! Look at how dark, how yellow those are. Woo! I was just like, I couldn't do it. So these 2 got knocked off and everything got lightened up. I'm okay with how it's looking. It's yellow enough for me, which is the most important part. But I am thrilled with how this is coming along. I think there's a shot that my Lent stitching is going to work out for me. You probably don't remember, but this was a stash acquisition from a long time ago, and when I showed you this, I said I had to buy it because it needed to be spring related, and it went with the project perfectly. This is the project I bought it for. It's a Zappy Dot. It says hello spring. It's perfect for this project. I love the fact that my needle minder coordinates so well with my project, which is a little bit ridiculous, but it makes me happy every time I look at it. So there is my Lent stitching with my lovely grime guard on it. I'm stitching this on an 11 by 11 Q-snap with all of my massive fabric tucked in down here. 77 stitches plus back stitching. So anyway, and then this block should be done. Today, on Sunday, February 26th, I'll be slightly ahead of schedule. Shh, don't tell anybody. Now, it's going to get more interesting because as we go over, so Easter Sunday is April the 9th, which means all through March, I'm going to have all of my conflicting stitching. So I'm going to have, so I stitch on the 6th, I stitch on the 11th, I stitch on the 25th, and I have library stitching. Now, the interesting thing is, so I worked on the 25th to get my block done for the little bits of Christmas. The 25th was a Saturday, which is great. The interesting thing, the 25th of March is also a Saturday. It's how the calendar works this year, so it's great. It's going to get a little bit more interesting on the 6th and the 11th. The 11th is also a Saturday, so that's great. The 6th is not. The 6th is a Monday. So my goal every day is to get my designated stitches into this project number 1. That's my number 1 priority, is I have to get my stitches into my spring bell pull, and then I will work on the secondary project slated for that day. So for example, today's Sunday, I should also be working on my spring ABCs, but I need to get my stitches into the bell pull first, and then any of my remaining stitching time I will put into spring ABCs, which means I might stay up late on those days to add to my stitching time. We'll see how it goes. So hence on the spring ABCs, I'm really glad that I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, because if I for whatever reason, I find it a little bit complicated on those Sundays. I have some breathing room in my stitching plan, that I'm going to be okay. But here's where I am on my Lent project so far. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I can't wait to see how this progresses going forward. Yes, I have the annoying back stitching to do today. It'll be fine. I keep telling myself, it'll be fine. Even on the little bits of Christmas, I was like, oh, now you need to do the back stitching. It was totally fine. It didn't take that long. I just, you know, in my head I go, oh, now I have to do the back stitching. It's not that big a deal. So I need to change my attitude about how I'm approaching it and sort of go, this is my Lent piece. It's going to be awesome. And as soon as I get that back stitching done, block number 1, 77 cross stitches plus the back stitching, and block number 1 will be complete. I can't wait. It will, I truly hope my plan works out for this. I would love to have this completely stitched. Don't get me wrong, then it goes into like the problematic, you know, what do I do with this? But, you know, at that point, then I will have 2 things on Shenandoah fabric to finish, so I will need to figure it out and get it done, right? If I have more of it, it will give me more impetus to figure it out. Now, this is not going to be framed. The plan is that this is going to get hung as a bell pull because I have the bell pull hardware for it. So Cheryl will be talking as we get closer. Anyway, there's a lot of, don't get yourself wrong. There's a lot of stitching left to go. There's about, there's approximately 8,900 cross stitches in this project plus back stitching. There are no beads, no buttons, none of that. There are a total of 21 colors. I love how this is coming along. So you will be seeing this every week from now till Easter Sunday, April the 9th, because this is my Lent stitch, plus a couple of other things. If I finish this ahead of schedule, I will revert to a previous Lent stitch, which Girly would be happy. She would be thrilled if I finished this early, because then it meant that I could get some stitches into Jerusalem. So that's my plan. If this gets fully stitched in advance of Easter Sunday, it's going to get completely replaced with Jerusalem, which will be the other Lent stitch. I love how this is coming along. Sorry if I said that before. I love this project. I love that I have this fabric. I love my needle minder. I love how it's, I loved my stitching this week. It was very, things that, it's always great when your hobbies make you happy, and ridiculously this happy. So it was a really great stitching week. I had a great stitching week. Loved everything I was working on, felt that I had a very productive week, and Lent stitching is off to a great start. So that is my topic for this week. So that's the topic for this week. So if you don't want to hear the other story, thanks for stopping by. I hope you have a great stitchy week. I look forward to seeing you next week. And if you're here for the weird stories, here it comes. So with the really cold temperatures this week, there was a part of me that was actually happy that it was that cold again. We'd had these kind of temperatures back in January, and in my head when that was going on, I had said to myself, there's a home task that you need to get done, which I did not get done. But we had really cold temperatures again, and I said to myself, no, seriously. This isn't going to be happening again. You need to hurry up and get your home task done. So what is that home task? Well, my basement freezer needed to be defrosted. So it's when you live in North America, this far north, where we do get those kind of temperatures, when it's minus 25 degrees, when the high is like minus 22, minus 20, and the overnights are like minus 30, that's a great time to defrost your freezer. Why? Because you can take everything out of your freezer and shove it into the garage and nothing happens to it. Now, my garage is not heated. Don't get me wrong. The garage is not minus 20 because it is attached to the house, and so you do get some radiant heat. But it's still, at minus 25, the garage is chilly. So you can unload the freezer into the garage. Just shove everything into the garage and defrost your freezer and get that task done. So it was really great. That's what I did in the minus bazillion T degree weathers. I reminded myself that it was grateful that we had another spell because I had been neglectful in the prior one. I defrosted my freezer. It's also really great because you haul everything out. You see what you've got, you reorganize the freezer, and then you say to, things going like, okay, you really do need to use that. And so your menu for the next week is set because it's all things from the freezer. You're going like, no, it's you need to do that. So that was great. My menu for this week is entirely planned. I know exactly what it's going to be. It's all coming out of the freezer. It's stuff that's going to be used up, which is great. It's always great. So less meal thinking, which is also a plus. Home task done, freezer cleaned, organized. Yeah. It's one of the small benefits to minus bajillion T weather. I got my home task done and I felt really great at the end of it. So that part was done. And it also reminded me of my other hilarious defrosting the freezer story. This occurred while I was a teenager. Now, as I was recalling it, I had a mom was like, why was it that Mom and I were defrosting the basement freezer in summer? Because it was summer. But that's when we were doing it. Anyway, I'm having that question. It's like, why were we doing it in the summer? That's weird. We should have been doing it in the winter. Anyway, we were doing it in the summer. So we had taken everything out of the freezer. We had cleaned out the freezer and the doorbell rang. And we had relatives from out of town that were unexpectedly dropping in. So my mother went to go, visit with the relatives. And so I was left with the task of putting everything back into the freezer. So we'd done everything up to that point. All I had to do was put everything back into the freezer in an organized fashion, which is exactly what I did. I did it my way, which meant that everything that I didn't like was on the so this is one of those deep chest freezers, like the long, deep ones is what we had. And so everything I didn't like was on the very bottom layer. We worked from least liked food up to most liked food. And I remember my mom saying a lot later where she was like going, she'd go into the freezer. She was looking for, generally she was looking for peas, which I don't like. Frozen peas to serve with dinner. And she's like, it's so weird that we don't have any peas. Well, eventually we got far enough down into the freezer that she came across the peas. It was all organized. They were all together. They were just at the very bottom of the freezer. And then I think when she hit that first package of frozen peas is when she clued in to how I had organized the freezer while she was up visiting with the relatives. I didn't organize it with the things like, really, we need to use these up, or, whatever. I didn't do that. Everything was like, it was from least liked food up to most liked food. I didn't care about dates. I didn't care about any of the stuff that I now, as, living on my own and, having to be in charge of the food, was like going, I cleaned out the freezer and I was like, ooh, no, we need to use that up. No, we need to use that. No, we need to use that. So that's why this week's meal planning is completely done. Because it's like, all of you need to be used now. But yeah, as a teenager, she left, I put everything back in. I didn't complain. It was organized. It was just organized from least liked food to most liked food. Anyway, so those are the freezer stories for this week. With that, I'm going to wrap this video up. We are well over an hour. So as always, I hope you're staying safe with everything that's going on, from weather things and, you know, still thinking of the people in Turkey and Syria and all of the efforts that are going on there, with the, you know, very cold weather that we've had here in North America. There's been lots of stories of power outages and, you know, down power lines. You know, I've had a big talk about this. Safety first, safety first, safety first. Make sure you're staying safe, with regardless of what's going on. Icy roads, snowy roads, just be cautious. You can be the most responsible driver out there. We all know there's some there's some crazy driver in a truck that thinks they're invincible. So just make sure you're aware of your surroundings. So stay safe. Safety first, safety first. So thinking of the people of Turkey, Syria, those people here in North America that are sort of combating some of the wild weather and the ramifications that they have on their daily lives, as those things are being repaired. Unfortunately, we are also marking the 1-year anniversary of the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia. I'm very sad that we're having to mark a 1-year anniversary of that, and that the fighting is ongoing. So thinking of the people of the Ukraine and hoping that that can come to a conclusion swiftly. And with that, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying healthy. I hope you're finding some time to stitch, and that your stitching is bringing you enjoyment, peace, contentment, a creative outlet, whatever you need it to be. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, guys.